when your child comes crying to you and you were never allowed to cry to anyone, you almost recall deeply in the body, I feel, that longing for what you could give to the child. And rather than giving it to the child, at least in my case, it was like this subconscious chaos that came out of me, like, well, yeah, well, I'm not going to give you what I never got. So, like, get out of here.
Hey everybody, thank you for tuning in to another episode of Men with Purpose. Today, I have the pleasure to be joined by Curt Storring. He is an online entrepreneur and the founder and host of the podcast That Work. Curt, thanks for doing this, man.
Yeah, it's exciting to be here and see you because we kind of know each other, and this is going to be a great way to get back in touch.
Yeah, that's the weird part. I've been like hopping from one community to another, just to kind of explore and see, get a little bit more guests for the podcast, and then I found you. I really resonated with your message on Instagram, and then we exchanged a bunch of messages, and we said, "Oh yeah, we actually did this thing with Samurai Brotherhood together." It's like, "Oh yeah, sure." So, small world.
Yeah.
Awesome, dude. Let's do a quick check-in. Is there something that that is present for you right now that you want to share?
You know what? The thing that's present for me most is being frustrated with being sick. And I don't know what it is. I don't care what it is. I'm not scared of a certain thing that other people are might be scared of. But it's really taken a lot out of me because it's also impacting my creativity. And I'm sitting here trying to work in a very heart-centered sort of space. And I feel like I'm blocked. I feel like I am screaming in my head and my brain is going at about 50% going, we're just not going to get there. Slow down. And as I'm practicing meditation, if we want to get into like non-duality, which I, listen to on the Waking Up podcast, Waking Up app with Sam Ferris, he talks about this a lot. Sam Harris, sorry. I can tell that there's a part of me that is witnessing and observing all of this. And what I feel most is the sickness, is like the body feel. And it's just this weird idea of like, okay, how separate can we get from the body feel of our experience while still being present with all of it? So that's what's real for me right now. And I'm going to do my best today to make coherent sense. But yeah, I've just been under the weather, and it's been an interesting experience, especially with kids who don't slow down. So it's been very tiring.
Brother, thank you very much, first of all, for doing this. Hearing you now, I'm checking in with gratitude, and also the gratitude that I'm healthy. I also recovered from whatever it was. Like, it seems like the common flu has totally disappeared for some strange reason, but we won't get into this right now. Well, maybe we will, I don't know. So yeah, I'm checking it with gratitude, and also to be doing this. This is I feel super privileged to be witnessing even a conversation like this, let alone participate in it. So yeah, I'm checking in with that.
Thanks, man. Thanks for sharing.
I'm curious to know a little bit, because I did a little bit of research about your work and how you got into this. But for everybody listening or watching this episode, can you maybe tell a little bit about what was your story before you found this work? What was young Curt like? I know you're roughly my age right now. You're 33, I think. So maybe that's, I don't know, 10 years ago. What was Curt like?
Yeah, well, that's where this all started. So I got married just out of university. It's been almost 10 years. In March, it'll be 10 years anniversary with my wife. And we had our first son very soon after that. So he is almost 9 years old. And that was the start of all of this, because I was just a young boy, really. Like, felt like a boy. I didn't feel like a man. I had no real guiding. My father was there in my life for most of it, but I didn't feel like I got a lot of sense of leadership or guidance from him. And so as I embarked on my life, I felt like I was just winging it, basically. And I didn't know that there's anything called trauma. I didn't know there's anything about, childhood wounds, conditioning, social conditioning. I didn't know any of that stuff. So as we got into life, I quit my job when my wife was pregnant. We moved out to the West Coast here in Canada to be closer to family. And basically, everything was in chaos because I decided to start a business. My wife quit her job. We had a kid. We moved provinces. We did all this kind of stuff, lifestyle changes. And it was extremely hard. And I reacted very poorly in that. And I noticed my reactions most poorly in regards to my new baby. And I was so impatient and I was so angry about the lack of control that I had in my life at this point that, I just blew up at everything. I was mean. I was scary, even to like a young baby. It's like screaming at him to get out of my office because I was trying to work and I was so stressed and all this kind of stuff. And I was not connected to my wife. And I would mope for like weeks on end, being like self-pity party, like, oh, everything's wrong. I'm broken. I don't know what I'm doing. Like, why can't things be better? So I was miserable, like really, truly miserable and angry, probably all the time. That's how it felt, at least. And so that was where I started. And I just thought like that's what life was. You're just supposed to be miserable. And if you have pockets of happiness, like, oh, lucky for you, but they're not going to stay. And it was a very negative viewpoint on the whole world. So that's where the journey starts. So let me know if you want me to carry on with that, or where you'd like to go from here.
Wow. Well, I mean, yeah, I was about to say, what's it like being a father and starting a business at the same time at 23? But I think it pretty much summarizes. It sounds like you were going through hell.
Yes, it felt like
Wow.
it. Absolutely.
Mm.
Yeah. And I don't think it has to be like that. I mean, I have talked to a lot of guys who had a better head on their shoulders, or perhaps did this at a more mature time in their life. And it's certainly not always as hell like as it was for me, but all of the things, and maybe we'll get into it now, might as well, I guess, go that way, is like it was triggering me. And it was triggering all the things in me that I had unresolved from my own childhood. These were feelings of control, perfectionism, which stemmed from abandonment and neglect and fear of loss, and all of these things that came from my own story. And, like there were no big T traumas. They were all sort of perceived trauma, as we all have. And yet they were unresolved. I still felt like that little boy with the original trauma. And that for me was my dad left us when I was 3. And there's a whole lot of stuff that happened after that. My mom got really sick. She wasn't there for a big chunk of my adolescence. And all of these things nobody talked about. And if I had feelings and I had expressions, I just remember in my family system, it was basically implicitly, it was implied that it was basically my problem. That if I had a big problem and then someone else in the family had a big problem, it's, well, my parents or whoever else would implicitly say that it was my fault for having the big feelings in the first place. Like, wow, why did you make me do this? Why are you having such a hard time here? Don't you know I can't deal with this right now? And so I learned that my feelings were too big for anybody else. That meant that I could only rely on myself. It meant that I had to be the end all and the be all, and I couldn't trust anyone, and everything had to be perfect, because if I showed a tiny bit of weakness, everyone would leave me because they don't have time for me, and all this kind of stuff in my story came up. And so when I had a kid, not only was I extremely stressed with the business and the move and all this kind of stuff, but a child shows you or reflects in you all of the unhealed or worst parts of you. Because when your child comes crying to you and you were never allowed to cry to anyone, you almost recall deeply in the body, I feel, that longing for what you could give to the child. And rather than giving it to the child, at least in my case, it was like this subconscious chaos that came out of me, like, well, I'm not going to give you what I never got. So like, get out of here, and that's how it came up. And so that's really why it was so painful for me. And that was the impetus for me getting into men's work and healing work and everything like that afterward.
Well, dude, I'm listening to you. I'm just getting shivers here, just because I can relate to so many of those things. It's a strange thing, and I'm really hoping that with this work we can change this. But it seems like now that I'm a little bit more experienced, and of course I'm learning every day, I just notice how people react and out of their triggers, out of their wounds, and it seems like nobody's really talking about the obvious thing. Oh, it's like, oh yeah, life has been like this. She's the weird person, or he's the weird person, not realizing that actually all of this behavior stems from some kind of trauma that is masqueraded in some kind of under some not very antisocial behavior, or something that is not really generally considered or regarded as constructive. And this is just a label that we place on someone, not realizing that underneath it all, there's trauma everywhere, and nobody like talks about it. And it just goes to show, like, most people haven't done their work, let alone start witnessing the other people that they're going through a lot of pain. So, oh, dude.
Yeah, that's something that I believe strongly, is that like almost every mental health issue and even a lot of physical health issues stem from unresolved trauma, unexpressed trauma. The trauma can get caught in the body. I have trained as a breath worker. Like I have done a lot of breath work, and the amount of movement and energy and healing that can come from expressing the trauma and the wounds from the body. You don't even have to tell the story. And that's why things like somatic experiencing are so powerful, because the body knows. I mean, there's a book, I think it's by Bessel van der Kolk, The Body Keeps the Score, that talks about this kind of stuff. And so it's physical maladies, it's emotional maladies, it's like mental health, all of this stuff, except for the very, very limited actual sort of issues that, are just going to happen anyway. I would say you go deep enough and you start healing deep enough wounds, all of that starts to get a little bit better. So I love what you said, which is like most people just get cast off as antisocial or weird. And if you just looked underneath, there's probably a sad, scared little boy or girl underneath that who just wants some help. So I think we should be very compassionate, not only to other people, but start with yourself. Because you can look at other people and go like, oh yeah, that sucks. What about you? Can you give yourself the compassion? Because that was a big problem for me. For some reason, I'm not entirely sure where this came from in my story, but my inner talk, I think, is perfectionism, because if I couldn't be perfect, then people wouldn't like me. But my inner talk was, if I messed up, like, you are an idiot. Like, how could you possibly do that? Are you so stupid? That was my talk. So finding compassion and then forgiveness for myself and eventually my family around me, like that was very difficult. So I would love for people to just go away with like some hope that, first of all, healing is possible, but also that like it's got to be loving and it's got to be gentle and it's got to be compassionate. Because like it's not, one of the things I like to tell the dads who follow us is like, it's not your fault. None of the things that happen to you are your fault, but it is 100% your responsibility and your responsibility alone to heal it. So don't take the burden of fault and go like, well, this only happened to me because I'm bad. That's toxic shame talking. That's not your inner self. You're not bad. The things that happened to you weren't your fault. And from that place, can you move and can you heal and can you go through this journey that you're talking about in this podcast and this project, and start doing the work to be more authentically yourself and to be more integrated as a human. So those are some of the things that I talk about and think about a lot, because, man, they've changed my life.
Wow. Dude, when you were saying about the inner voice that kept coming up for you, like if I was to close my eyes, I could just hear it inside of me. So I think it just goes to show everybody has these inner perfectionists that are incredibly shameful and like would make you so little in case you fucked up or something like this. And it's there is this guy that I really love, and I hope I can get him onto the podcast. I've done a little bit of work with him. His name is Michael Gay. So he says that trauma usually happens in parts of the brain where language isn't present. That's why you need really a way to process it. Breath work is one way. All these kind of psychosomatic experiences are another way to deal with this. But yeah, trauma is there, and it's gonna keep coming up in those triggers that you mentioned at the beginning of the conversation. So that's usually a sign that you can go and like really be able to either meet or look in your shadow, and maybe even touch it for a little bit. So yeah.
Yes.
Talk to me how everything, I guess, how did everything happen? You're going through this incredibly intense moment, physically, mentally, spiritually, emotionally, probably everything is a roller coaster. how did you learn about men's work, and how did things happen from there?
Yeah, so my journey into any of this sort of inner work it started with business actually. And I was continuing to build business, and my second son was just born at the time. So this was about 2 years after my first. And I heard one of the guys who I follow say, I have been meditating and it's made me more productive. And I thought, like, ooh, business productivity. That's sweet. I want more of that. So like maybe I'll meditate to be better at business. And I meditated with the Headspace app. And I just did like the free 10-day, whatever it was. This was like 5, 6 years ago. I don't know if they've changed it. And what happened by the 10th day is I went out of my office, and I remember exactly where I was. And I went to walk to the back of the couch, going around the corner. My wife and my first son were there. And my first son did something that would typically have made me yell at him, like just gone off the handles and scream, like, what are you doing? And in this case, I stopped and I didn't yell. And I just noticed wanting to yell, and I could breathe, and then I didn't. And that like blew the doors off my entire idea of the world. I was like, you can do this. I didn't know there was a space. And I think it's often attributed to Viktor Frankl. You have to find the space between the stimulus and the response so that you can choose how to react. I didn't even know that space existed. And so with 10 days of meditation, I mean, maybe I just got lucky, but 10 days of meditation, I saw this. And for whatever reason, I attributed it to the meditation. I thought, wow, I need to go all in, whatever that looks like. And so I, bought the rest of the app, and I started meditating every day. That brought up some interesting ideas about spirituality and existence, consciousness, and all this kind of stuff. And I just went deeper and deeper and deeper and started journaling. I started doing, breath work, and it probably took, I don't know, 4 or 5 years of doing this before I even came across like the idea of men's work. So I was in a number of masterminds over the years, and I was continuing to do my work, which for me was meditating, journaling, and basically just introspecting, thinking deeply about my life. And I'm pretty good at that for whatever reason. And so I feel as though I made a lot of headway, but nothing ever stuck. Nothing like I could never get ahead of, well, maybe if I just like meditate enough, I'll stop screaming at the kids. I'll go for like a week or two without doing it, and then I'll just be right back there screaming. And in my journal, it's like, I'm broken. I can't do this. And so, years pass, and we traveled the world. We lived in Thailand for a couple of years. We actually lived in Bulgaria, which I know is where you are at least from. So like, yeah, we did all this kind of stuff. And each little piece of the puzzle added up to the learnings that I needed to sort of get to the base of why I felt so bad. And when I came back home from my travels, I started meeting with my grandfather for like a bi-weekly lunch and a cigar and a glass of wine. And I'm so fortunate to have him in my life as an elder, is I don't think that many people have elders anymore. And I think it's a very lost position in our society, to the detriment of both the young people in society and the elders themselves. That being said, I have been meeting with my grandfather for the last few years now. And in talking to him, we talk about this stuff, how I'm feeling, what I am thinking about. And at one point, somewhere along the way, after meditating, journaling, traveling, introspecting, all this kind of stuff that started helping a little, I said to him, like, I'm feeling really upset and sad, and like, oh, I don't know what it is. And as soon as I said, I don't know what it is, this thing came out, which was like, I just feel like a little 3-year-old boy who wants his mommy and his daddy to be there for him. And then I started crying, and like, I just sat there bawling, and he, didn't say anything. He put his hand on me. He was there. And that was exactly how you hold space. He didn't try and fix it. He just witnessed it and was there. And that was one of the many pivotal moments in my own journey, which is just admitting what I feel now is my core wound. And I thought, this came up like last week, for example. I thought I had done so much work on this, because this was maybe 3 years ago now that I came across this wound. And I've done a lot of work and healing and forgiveness and all this kind of stuff. And yet I'm finding today that there are still things that come up that are attached to that. recently I was wondering why I didn't feel support from some of my communities and why I didn't feel like I could make friends. And in doing more introspection and journaling and meditating, it was like, oh no, this is related to this core wound again. So this is a little bit of a side note just to remind people that, you know, you're never fully healed, I don't think, but it's so much easier to do the work when you've got a strong history of mindfulness and meditation. And so from talking to my grandfather, I had heard someone mention breath work. And I thought, okay, maybe this is the next step because I don't know what to do. I've got this like new wound that I didn't know about. How am I going to heal from it? And someone said, oh, breath work gave me these amazing insights and I feel great. So I was like, let's try it. Okay, so I talked to the guy. He put me in touch with the guy, did a couple of breathwork sessions, super helpful, had some, you know, almost psychedelic-like experiences. And the facilitator was like, hey, have you ever heard of a men's group? It's like, no, obviously not. Nobody's heard of a men's group. And he's like, yeah, we're actually, yeah, exactly. It sounds weird. He's like, yeah, it's just like a group of guys who get together every week and talk about this kind of stuff and hold space. And it's where you can express these kind of things. It's like, oh, you can do this with other guys? Because like, it kind of feels weird even to do it with a trusted facilitator. And so I went to the open house and joined the men's group. And that was 2.5 years ago now. And that just catapulted things way further because doing all of this work in relation to other men is absolutely necessary in my opinion. It opened up things in me that I didn't know existed. It allowed healing paths and modalities that I didn't know I could reach. And I got so far alone. Like I don't know why I am so good at men's work. Like I'm so good at my own inner healing work. And even as like a black belt inner healer, self-healer, I could only get like 50% of the way there. And I needed other people. I needed other men to have this journey with so that I could move all the way through. And I feel like that's what has allowed me to get to where I am today, which is a place of like calm, confidence, and leadership. And I still screw up all the time, but I come back so much faster and I feel grounded and whole and authentic. And I like have self-love and compassion and forgiveness now. So all of this journey from first days of meditating, because like, I just wanted to do better business. And I mean, I will add in as a father that the reason that I kept this up was because I didn't want to be such a bad parent anymore or husband. Like I wanted to be better at business. Yes. And I was screaming at my kids daily. And even though I couldn't help myself at that time, I would go to bed every night, most of the nights crying to myself because I hated that I was hurting my kids. And so I used that motivation like I wouldn't have been able to do without having kids to almost do this like a full-time job. It felt like I had to heal myself because I was ruining my own kids. And there's nothing quite so motivating as that. So I think that's most of the story through. A lot of other things happened from, you know, plant medicines. My father died, and that was a very intense healing and grief period. So there's a lot more to it, but that's sort of the 30,000 foot view, I suppose.
Gotcha. Wow, man. Wow. I really like the progression of how you started healing with kind of these, you know, meditation modalities, then breath work, then you found community, as they say, you know, takes a village to raise a boy, and you being able to give that to your inner child so you can give it to your other. I think you have 2 sons.
3 sons now. Yeah.
Oh,
but
wow.
I had 2 at the time.
Wow. On a row. Okay. Love it.
Yeah.
Good. Wow. Yeah. I think there's something very, very special when a father is able to connect with that inner part of him that hasn't been healed and really makes a commitment, say, look, the buck stops with me. I have the epigenetic responsibility, to borrow a term from another man from the Samurai Brotherhood I interviewed, Ben. And so, yeah, what better way to pass over all this wisdom than to take responsibility? Because, you know, young boys, as far as I know, I'm not a father yet, but young boys, they will just look at what you're doing as opposed to say, you know, listen to what you're saying. They're just going to look at you. So you have an extra pair of eyes sitting somewhere here that are observing constantly.
Exactly. Yeah, well, that's the thing. And there's a couple things that I will say on this point is that one, absolutely, if you're a father, it is absolutely your number one responsibility to heal your own shit. Because if you don't, it's very clear in society, and I'm sure if you looked at studies and all this kind of stuff, it would be very clear that trauma is intergenerational. That which we don't heal, we just pass on to our kids. Like, we are the way we are because our parents were the way they are. And okay, a lot of people blame their parents because of that, but why were your parents that way? How were they raised? Oh, well, it's because their parents were the way they were, and forever and ever in the past, right? Like, this is just an ongoing cycle. Nurture means everything, in my opinion. It is so important the way that we are raised and the feelings we get as a child and the body safety that we feel as a child growing up. And so when you are a dad and you wake up to the fact that you can do something about your inner world, that you can heal, it becomes your responsibility to be a chain breaker. And I mean, breaking the chain of generational trauma that otherwise you would be burdening your children with. And that was not acceptable for me. And I would suggest it's not acceptable for any dad to go through life numb to his own pain and simply pass it on. Because if you don't deal with it, your kids will pick up on it. You'll be an asshole. You'll be a jerk. You won't be there for them. You won't know how to securely attach with them and empathize with them. They will pick up all the shit that you're not willing to deal with. And now your kids are dealing with your shit. Like, what kind of man is that? That's weak, in my opinion. So do your own work, especially as a dad. And my job as a father now, I went through this whole inner work journey alone until I found men's group, till I was, talking to my grandfather, but everything was alone. I had no idea this was even a thing. My commitment to my kids is I'm going to teach them at least the tools, because I can't get away from wounding them. Like, I am going to give them a father wound, just like I've got a father wound. Everyone's got one. And all I can do is give them the tools to then deal with it that I had to make myself. So the analogy I like to use is that I stumbled across this mine in my psyche that was wounding, trauma, pain, conditioning, and I almost fell down it into the mine shaft. And slowly but surely, I started going like, I wonder what's down there. So I went down there and I found a couple of interesting pain spots to work on. And I was like, I don't have like a pickaxe. I don't know what to do here. So I had to like, what kind of tools do I need to dig in this mine? And I was like, okay, well, I'm gonna need a pickaxe. I need some wood. I need some metal. How do I put these things together? I had to make the tools. And then, okay, well, how do I even use this? I got to swing it. So like, I'm learning all these tools and modalities for healing and introspection. And man, it's painful. And it takes a long time. And it really sucks. And now I've got a map to my mind. I've got the tools to do the mining or the healing, if you will. What I want to do now is leave my kids with a map to their own mind and a set of tools that they can use to mine when they're ready. That way they know it's okay to go there. They don't have to suffer as long as I did. I'm going to be like, hey kids, I probably fucked you up along the way. Sorry. And here's what you do if you're ready to heal, because I've done this. I'm here for you. I see you. This sucks. It's not going to be easy. And I've already done the hard work for you. So now it's your turn to go and get your hands dirty, but at least you won't be risking death trying to do this with no tools like I did growing up. And I can't think of a better sort of legacy to leave my kids other than one of like being authentic and healing and loving life. So that's my sort of goal as a father in many respects.
Ooh, dude, powerful. Curt spitting out some wisdom here about all you dads and future dads and potential dads looking at this, watching at this. Wow, awesome. Wow.
Thanks, man.
Oh man, I'm on fire just by listening to you. I'm like, my seat is getting really hot just by like sitting here.
Nice.
Talk to me a little bit about the feeling of being a dad. I'm approaching this stage right now where I'm contemplating and thinking about it, and I know that's going to come with a lot of issues and difficulties, things that I'm going to be challenging. For me right now, it's something I'm working through. There is part of me that is afraid of becoming a father, and part of me is like incredibly excited about it. Did you had something similar that you had to go? Is this, I don't know, do other men feel something like this? Because with these kind of things, I had an ex boss of mine, Ukrainian. She used to say, you're never ready to get married, start a business, or have children. So is it
all of that?
Okay. Yeah.
So what I'll say on this is that I think our society today does a terrible job preparing people, and I think it's often our responsibility to get there and to prepare. But I think that we can also give each other a break, because I have huge judgment to men who say they're not going to be a father. Like, that is why you're here, dude. You're a man. You can make a child. Step up. And yes, you have to be able to find the woman with whom to do that.
Mm.
And yes, you have to be heart open enough to support the child and the children as they grow. But like, biologically, if you go back to hunter gatherer days, which like we're actually human, we didn't suddenly become something new in this modern age of the last couple hundred years. We are much more closely based on these like hunter gatherer humans that we came from.
Fact checkers agree.
Yeah. Some like
sorry,
some like
I'm
some
into your
techno.
no,
So,
sure.
some like whatever tech metaverse thing we're trying to go for now, like, you would procreate, you would survive, you'd procreate, and that would be it. And that is, I think, the responsibility and the birthright of all men. And what we do in society these days is we infantilize people continuously. We nerf the world so that they don't have to deal with things. And I mean, we're seeing it right now. And we won't go deep into this, I hope, because I am tired of talking about it. But what we see in the world right now is safety over freedom. Because heaven forbid you have something bad happen to you and you are then responsible for dealing with it. Look, some people die. That's too bad. That's life. Get good with that, because you're going to die one day too. And whether it's from something that has a 0.01% likelihood of killing you, or whether you get hit by a truck, or whether you live to be an old man, that's like, it's neither here nor there, but you will die. And I think our fascination, or the opposite of that, pardon me, our inability to talk about death stops us from really seeing what's important in the world, which to me is family and extending our gene pool, if you want to look at it in a very scientific sort of way. But generally, men should have predetermined needs to be a father, I think. And in that, we need support. And we just don't have it today, because it's not cool to do that as a society. How are you supposed to like be super free and have 2-job households and like, I don't know, play your Xbox on the weekend and drink beer with your buddies and do all these things that men in their 30s and even 40s are doing still, which they should have done as teenagers? How are you supposed to do all those things with a kid? Well, you can't. And it sucks. And you have to let that part of yourself die. And that's what it takes. And if you're not ready to do that, because you've got wounding, because you've got trauma, because you have no good male role models who have shared these things with you, of course, you're going to be scared. Of course you will be. It's no wonder. It makes perfect sense. And as a part of you doing your own work, if you haven't had children yet, why is it so scary to put yourself out there? What is it actually that's stopping you from doing this? Is it a loss of independence? And is independence truly what you value? Because if it is, then great. Do that. Be a grown child the rest of your life and die alone. How does that feel? For me, it feels terrible. And like, I'm not fully a man yet. And so I know those are, fighting words for a lot of guys who are like, well, I'm just going to do what I want to do. You can't tell me how to live my life. Like, no, but I can judge you for it. And I will. And I'm happy to say that, because fatherhood for me has been the biggest spiritual growth path and the most clear thing that I've ever done to get me along this path. My children are my teachers. My children help me to see what's possible for me. They help me make choices. And I'm not sure if you've read 4,000 Weeks by Oliver Burkeman. It's an amazing book about time management, but it's all talking about the fact that we have 4,000 weeks as an average human lifespan. And there are certainly going to be things that we cannot get done in our lives. So we must then choose. And there are opportunity costs and there will be FOMO, but we actually derive meaning out of the things that we choose to do at the expense of other things. And so for me, having children is at the expense of many other things, but there could be nothing more powerfully meaningful than putting the meaning of having that choice and having children in your life. So I was not ready. One of the things that helped me, which society doesn't typically do, is I had friends who had kids. Our friends were older than us. I mean, we were very young having kids, I think 23, but our older friends had kids. They were encouraging. My family has all had children young. My grandparents were still very young. And it made sense, I suppose, because I also didn't want to be the ancient dad who, couldn't make it to the high school graduation. My own father had a second family and he died at age 50 when his other children were 7 years old. And like, that's not what I wanted to risk. I didn't want to be 65 at the graduation and like shuffling and just, not living because I wanted to live my life. Damn it. I just want more independence. That's like
Mm,
petulant child talk. And, again, this is just my judgments. It's not right or wrong. It's just me straight up judging and being open about that. And hopefully anybody listening who's triggered will examine the trigger. That's what we say in men's group all the time. Like, the process is the process. It's not what I think you're going to get out of it. If I judge you, that's on you to deal with. Either
mm,
you look inside and you say, no, he's wrong. Screw you, Curt. Or you look inside and go like, oh, that made me feel bad because X, Y, and Z. Okay, I've got some work to do. So whatever you take away from this now rambling monologue on fatherhood, I just challenge you to put the ball in your court and really see if you need to say screw you to me or if you need some work to do. So no, it's never easy. No, there's never a good time. You just have to take the plunge. And I think that's part of being a man in many respects.
mm. Let's talk about fatherhood. I mean, you said some really, really great stuff, and I hope people don't disregard it just by listening to it. And again, maybe it doesn't fit into their worldview. And I think disagreements are fine. This is supposedly democracy, right? We need to have a constructive dialogue, and people with different viewpoints disagree, and that's fine. Contrary to popular belief right now, where people are being censored left and right, and I have very strong opinions about it, but we'll try not to get into this right now. Let's stick with the topic. Can you maybe talk a little bit about some of the lessons, because you did say your children are your greatest teachers. So what was that process been like?
Ooh, very painful typically,
Mm,
because it's just been along the way of my journey. Like, why am I reacting the way I'm reacting when they scream? Why is my nervous system so out of whack that when there's excess noise, I start feeling overwhelmed? What is it about when they barge into my office unannounced when I'm working? Why do I get triggered at that? There's control, there's perfectionism, there's need for my own space, there's learning to set boundaries. And so all of these things come from the lessons that I'm taught. And they also seem to mirror back to you all of your worst qualities. And so seeing these things reflected back, even after you've fixed them or even after you've healed them, so to speak, because there's a long feedback loop in terms of when you start parenting better from a more grounded and healed place to when your children start trusting that. And so from screaming, from shaming, my children developed certain ways of being and behaviors that I know a lot of parents consider like naughty or bad or whatever, screaming or being disobedient as though that's a bad thing. All these kind of things that I knew only existed because of the way that I had treated them. And so it was a constant struggle at the beginning when I started doing this work. I was like, guys, I'm better. I'm not screaming at you anymore. I'm not whatever. And you're still triggering me because you don't believe me yet, because I've spent years of your life treating you a certain way. And, it hurts for them. They have to know that they're safe. And I wasn't teaching them that. And so the response that they were giving me made perfect sense. They were crying out for me to love them better. And even when I started to, it took a while for them to finally come around. And it's still not all done. I see things and I see trauma responses in my children today from things I did, 4 or 5 years ago. And it's a constant reminder to be in reflection and to not take my foot off the pedal of healing and growth and mindfulness. Because it can be easy when you feel better to be like, I don't need to meditate. I'm good. Like, there's no more work to be done. And your kids trigger you again. And it's like, oh, right. If I don't meditate, like, this is going to come up. Or if I don't remember that this is how I used to be, I might start thinking negatively towards my kids, and that's not
mm,
their fault. It's mine. So a lot of it has been developing compassion and forgiveness for the father I used to be honest. And that's been very hard because as I mentioned before, my inner talk was negative all the time.
mm,
And so to develop love and compassion and forgiveness for myself took a long time. And it was also very healing outside of being a father to forgive all of the things that I have done over the years, all of the negative things that I had judged myself for, to say, hey, man, that made sense.
Hmm.
You're just doing the best you could with the tools you had. And it wasn't very good, but you didn't know any better. And now you do. So you can always do better, even though you couldn't then have done better. So it's the constant reflection and the constant checking in of like, what is my place in the universe, basically? Because here now is this child who's got he's got 30 extra years on me to live this life that he's going to live. And I don't know what it's going to look like. How do I then speak into his life? What do I need to do now as a dad? How do I prepare to grow old myself? How do I support my child as he grows into my age? Like there's this constant feed of new question and prompts and processes, if you're into men's work, that if you just pay attention to fatherhood, are constantly bombarding you.
Wow. Listening to you makes me think about a lot of things that it's just, I think, reaffirming what I'm already thinking. Like, you need to do your own work, because inadvertently, whether you do your work or not, it's a process. Even if you think you kind of know it all, I speak to a lot of guys who are in this for like 20, 30 years, and there's still things that are coming up with, not only for themselves, but also with their sons, of all people. So it's an ongoing process. You're inadvertently, willingly or unwillingly, consciously or unconsciously, going to pass over some traumas to your kids. Try to minimize this. Try to really give them the tools and kind of explain to them how this is happening, because nobody showed us the way. I'm pretty sure that's the same case for you as well. Nobody told us this whole thing that even exists. I was just like, why am I reacting like I'm reacting? I'm not responding to something. I'm just reacting out of even being in front of a computer and working sometimes, just like, and these are all triggers and generational trauma that frankly nobody else is going to fix for us. It's up to us to do that. So
Absolutely.
Okay, a little bit more on being a father. What are some tips that you have for dads or men that are just about to become dads?
Okay, there so much. Where do I start? Obviously, do your own work first. That's number one. And you should do that until you are no longer the biggest issue in your children's lives. And then you got to figure out what to actually do, what do they actually need. And so for me, the thing that I touch on most is secure attachment. And the book that I would recommend in all cases is called The Power of Showing Up by Dr. Dan Siegel. And he talks about the 4 S's that are required for secure attachment. And secure attachment is basically when the child knows that you are there regardless. So they need to feel safe. They need to feel seen, not just physically, but also their inner world. And they need to be soothed when something goes wrong, to make sure that they know somebody is there for them. And all of these things together help them feel secure. And what he says is that parents ought be the safe harbor to come when a child is feeling like they need that, but also the launch pad from which a child can launch into the world and make their own way. And so that's a quick overview of secure attachment. That is number one, absolutely required. A few of the other principles that I like are empathy and compassion. Like when we talk to our kids, I've never seen it modeled in like pop culture properly in a way that's not shame-based. Because we often go like, oh, what do you mean you fell down? Why'd you do that? Huh? Like, why'd you hit your brother? And the actual better way to do that, not only that will make them feel better, but also the child then acts better, so to speak, is to empathize. Like, oh, I see you fell down. That must really hurt. I'm here for you. You're not going to be doing this alone. Or if one of them hits the other one, hey, I see you're hitting right now. You must feel, you reflect whatever the emotion might be. And this is partially emotion coaching, which is in a book called Raising Emotionally Intelligent Children by Dr. Gottman. And there's a number of sort of conscious parenting styles or communities that talk about this. I have found that as my sort of healing work gets deeper, I rely less on these sort of tactics, but they saved me so much as a crutch when I was doing my work, or in deeper part of my sort of work as a father. And a couple places to look. One is called RIE parenting, RIE parenting. And it's all about, there are no bad kids. There are simply kids reacting to their environment, which is exactly what we're talking about with trauma and all that kind of stuff. And so the behavior you're seeing is in reaction to how the child feels. So make them feel safe, make them feel seen, make them feel soothed by empathizing, by stating the emotion you see in them so they become emotionally intelligent. That's incredibly important. And just listen to them. Like, be there, don't fix, don't judge, don't shame. Like, oh, you didn't eat your food. Why didn't you eat your food? You're going to do this, this, and this. That makes mommy sad when you do that. That makes daddy upset. And like making them responsible for your feelings is completely unacceptable. I guess the last thing that I like to tell guys is like it matters from the birth. The way you show up. I used to think when my first was born, I was like, oh, I can't wait till he's like 6 or 7 so I can play ball with him. Then I'll be able to like actually parent. And turns out it matters from the get-go how you parent. So I can see the difference in my little one who's 2 from the first 2, because I showed up so differently. I was so slow. And I knew that his cries were simply his way of communicating, that he was feeling things. And so I would say, oh, you must be feeling this, or I see you're crying. Maybe this is what's wrong. And when I changed his diaper, I would go so slowly and I would tell him each step, I'm going to remove this now. I'm going to change the diaper now. I'm going to wipe you with a cold cloth. Breathing for him to model that. And now he will go, I'm like, actually breathe. I'm
Wow.
like, yes. So it's like
Wow.
modeling these tools from the get-go. That's
Mm,
where the nervous system develops from birth onward. So if you miss as a father the chance to connect, whether that's skin on skin contact, talking to the child, looking into the face, holding them, rocking them, it's not just the mother's job. It has to be dad too. If you want to have that secure attachment with them, it starts from like day one. So that's something that I wish I knew, because I sometimes long for those days back with my older 2 so I can get that. And now it's simply a matter of how do I develop that as they approach 9 and 7 years old. So it's never too late. That's another thing. If you've got kids already and you're like, well, I've already screwed them up, it's never too late. Like I thought that too. I was sure that I was like way past the point of screwing them up, and things have changed. Like
mm.
they're going to have the wounds we talked about. I'm going to give them the modeling for how to fix those, but things have got way better and it's not ever too late. So, I mean, there's a million things, but those are like the most important ones that come into mind right now.
I don't know about people listening, but I myself got some golden nuggets from this. So really thank you
Mhm.
very much, brother, for sharing all this
Thank
wisdom.
you.
And hopefully people that are listening, both mothers and fathers, or future or wannabe mothers and fathers, hopefully they really at least take away, go and read the book that you mentioned. I'm certainly gonna go and read it right now, because all of these things made so much sense on a nervous level, just thinking about like, oh man, I really wish I would have been seen like this from my dad, or from being treated like this. So wow.
Yeah, well, that's important for you to read too, because you can learn how to reparent yourself by reading the
There we go.
parenting books.
Exactly.
So
Yeah.
there you go.
Wow. Okay. Okay. Wow. Dude, I'm conscious of time. A couple more questions, because yeah, this can go on like this. We'll probably need to do a part 2 for sure. Um, what do you think? I mean, that's kind of, you already answered this. What can we do for future generations? And I think the answer is just do your own work to begin with, and obviously afterwards is just have children. So there is a next generation.
Yeah, well,
Yeah.
that's the whole point of this project that I'm doing, dad work, is like if we heal fathers, they stop hurting their kids. Their kids have a chance to have like secure attachment and healthy nervous systems. The children and the communities that they start are going to be healthy and connected and loving. And 2 to 3 generations from now, we'll have a healed world in many ways. And I think I think unhealed men, especially, are the cause of almost every problem in the entire world.
Amen
And
to this.
yeah,
Yeah.
right. We call it the patriarchy, but it's not masculinity. That's boy energy. That's absolutely boy energy. And in King, Warrior, Magician, Lover, they call it boy psychology. This is not the mature expression of masculinity, the so-called patriarchy that we see. This is wounded little boys who grew up and are looking to fill the holes in their hearts left by the wounds of their parents and the bullies in society. So yeah, like heal yourself. That's where it starts. Don't try and change the world until your own block is taken care of. I once heard a mentor say, you can't change the world if you can't pay the rent. And what he went by was just like, take care of yourself before you go out there and change the world, because you need a solid base. So that's probably the number one thing I would say, is just start with you.
Yeah, I think that's why I keep saying this, and people might hate me for it, but this is why one of the reasons why Jordan Peterson had such a, such a following is like he's espousing this, responsibility. Do your own bed, fix your own damn room before you. Yeah, exactly. And I'll go to say, I'll go as far as saying that I don't think we've seen that really. I mean, now with what you're doing and what we're doing here is hopefully people can really get a glimpse of really what mature masculinity looks like, because there's a difference between being a man and being a mature male human being. Those are two different things that are getting confused. There's most of the time, especially with our politicians, as we can see plenty of examples, unfortunately, of boys stuck in a man's body and reacting really just. And I wouldn't be surprised if we speak with some of them and probably the relationships with their dads were probably terrible, because there was nobody there to model, so they kind of pick things up from what seems to be a really a declining society right now in culture. But again, that's another topic for another time perhaps. But yeah, I'm pretty sure that even Carl Jung, I think, said it, that there is this kind of psychological, the developmentally arrested, that at some point psychologically they freeze, and the body grows, but psychologically they don't really develop. And so I think this is what most people tend to label as patriarchy, but that's really wounded boys acting out.
Yep.
Right. One final question. Was there something that you wanted me to ask you that I didn't?
Ooh, that's an interesting one. You know what? I don't think so. I feel really spent in terms of like all the things that I like talking about. And I could go on and on and on for hours, but nothing specifically, I don't think. But thank you for the offer. That's a really good one. And I might steal that for my own podcast.
I stole it, so you just pass it on. Okay, nice. Awesome. All right. For people that resonate with your message, with all your wisdom, with everything that you just shared right now, where can they find more about your work?
Yeah, thank you. And thank you for this conversation. This was so much fun and so aligned, obviously. So I'm just lit up right now. If this is something that you would like to learn more about, dad.work is the website. Instead of .com, it's .work. We've got the Dad Work podcast on Apple, Spotify, wherever. Instagram's also a good place, dadwork.curt, C-U-R-T. And then you'll find all the other things we've got there. We've got free email series, we've got a community, we've got men's groups, we've got all that kind of stuff for dads.
Boom, there we go. One of the most impactful conversations, because I don't think we talk enough about the value of being a good father and a good dad, just because so many of us didn't have a father around, or maybe he was there but was very passive. So thank you so much, brother, for the work that you're doing. You're doing God's work here.
Thank you.
All right, everybody, please go check out Curt's work on Instagram. I'll put all the links in the description, the show notes, and I'll see you in the next one. Thanks.